What's up, everybody? I'm the producer of the Decision Lab. I'm new here, and today we tried something a little bit new. We revisited our old episode with ENERGYBits. We've been getting some comments about it, and we wanted to address them.
Got a little bit spicy, but it was a fun time. And we got to share in this episode our core thesis on Decision Lab, like what we stand for, how we think about these things, and where the questions and the frameworks and all the stuff that we put people through come from. So hope you enjoy this one. See you on the inside.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Decision Lab reaction series, special episode going on today. This is where we revisit our spiciest episodes or react to things happening in pop culture. And we're going to see what we got right in this episode, if our opinions have changed at all. Today, we are reacting to something that is blowing up on our YouTube right now, which is the interview with Catherine Arnston, the founder of ENERGYBits. The part of the episode that is super contentious, and I've been answering the comments on, is why does it matter where her PhD accreditation came from? For those of you that don't know me, I'm CJ. I'm the producer of Decision Lab. I work on all of the behind-the-scenes stuff and sometimes pop in for these episodes. So today, I'm going to interview Cody on his opinions. We're going to revisit the episode and watch the contentious moments.
Let's get into this thing. I'm pumped. I would also like the audience to know that I brought my chicken with me today. I keep this little chicken with me at all times to remind myself to not be a chicken. So it is with us today, and I just want everyone to know that.
We are affirming our beliefs with no fear of the internet.
Let's go.
Before we get into it, I think we just should revisit what the Decision Lab mission is really quickly, just so everyone is clear on why we are responding to this. It is not just because this was like a spicy moment that we can, like farm for rage bait or anything like that. I think this is a moment that is important for the Decision Lab's mission, which is we are trying to help people make confident, science-backed health decisions by cutting through the noise, hype, half-truths, marketing, all of that. Mostly because we are in a space where anyone can sound credible online. We are verifying, simplifying, and clarifying. So that way you can make informed choices.
100%.
And you don't have to do all the extra work.
100%. And this came from Chloe and I, we both have science backgrounds, and a lot of brands ask us to promote their products and stuff to our followers as science communicators. Chloe's in the ADHD and nervous system regulation space. I'm in the trauma and healing after breakup space. And so a lot of brands come to us asking us to promote their stuff. And we started to notice when we were doing our own research on them that some of them make certain claims on their website or say certain things about credentials or whatever that is kind of a half truth or not really fully true or is kind of weird. And that changes our decisions on what brands we'll put in front of our followers individually. And so that's where the genesis of this whole thing came, of this whole concept for the podcast, is to do that live. So when you read, CJ is the best producer in the world because she's like, I am going hard right now in the comments. Like when you were talking about how people were coming at us, or not coming at us, but they were just kind of talking about this. That was the thing in this episode they were talking about when we were trying to verify some of this stuff. I was just so surprised and honestly, hell yeah, I don't care. That's what we're going to keep doing it. I don't give a shit, because that's what we want to do. We need to get more clarity out there, especially with all this AI slop that's coming too. But I digress. That's a whole different thing.
Yeah. I think the thing that was most interesting to me in the comments section was that people were like, who is this guy and why does he care? And so we are bringing you the guy. I am interviewing him today. We're reviewing this moment. We're going to hear him answer for himself, and I'll help represent TDL as the producer. Without further ado, let's get into the video and see what you said and why we're going back and forth on it. What's up with this PhD?
Let's do it. The guy has arrived. I am here. I am him. Still for a couple minutes here.
Okay.
I love the energy and the hype, but I would love to understand a little bit more about, you mentioned you got a PhD in natural health. Could you summarize your research question and your dissertation and explain maybe why your findings were significant to your field?
Yeah, well, so what happened was, because I'm running this company, and what was happening was I'm completely self-taught. I called myself a citizen scientist because for 14 years, I just tethered myself to the internet and PubMed and researched all these different terms that I had never known about because I had been studying business. I'd never had a single drop of biochemistry, molecular chemistry, biology, nothing. So I was completely self-taught. And it freaked me out for a while, thinking, as I learned all this stuff, and I was proposing different reasons why people were getting sick, and it turned out all the other PhDs were saying the same thing. I'm like, this is wild that I've taught myself the same stuff that these PhDs also know. And so I speak on podcasts and conferences, but a lot of the science conferences, like there's one called A4M, they wouldn't let me speak because I wasn't an MD or a PhD. So I thought to myself, okay, I'll go get one, because I need to get this information out, and I needed people to trust me, because when you walk into a room and you're self-taught, there's still some question about whether you're legitimate or not. But if you walk into a room with your PhD, they know that you know your stuff. So
Dude, I would just like to say I do feel that. I mean, I do understand what she's getting at, what she's saying. Like that makes a lot of sense to me.
100%. I think we can. This is actually a great place for a pause. I 100% hear what she's saying, and like, to be clear, the research that she like has looked at on her own, like going through PubMed and whatnot, like that is a verified source. She is looking in the right places for that kind of thing. I also think it's important to bring up that like a lot of founders that we interview are kind of in this same space. They are not scientists.
100%.
They have this idea, they like the science field, but they don't know how it works. A lot of what we see is, I mean, if they're developing a product like deep sleepwear, for example, like that doesn't, really require you to have like a biology background or something like that. Like you can found that. It's not something you're putting in your body. It's not going to hurt you.
Right.
And then what we see with other teams that are like supplements, for example, is these founders, they've got business backgrounds, they don't have science backgrounds, but they hire chief science officers or they work with research teams because, this is a tough space to be in.
Right. Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, I feel her too. I am one of those types of founders as well. Like I have a BA or a bachelor's in cognitive behavioral neuroscience, and I'm trained in, I'm an IFS psychotherapy practitioner. So I get it. Like when you're a practitioner in the IFS space, like you just get all these weird looks. The exact feeling she's describing, I have felt as well. So I get it.
Right.
I know where she's coming from. I've done the same thing, all of the citizen science, and I am looking at all the stuff, and I can talk with PhDs as if I am one of them, but that does not mean that I literally have a PhD. So there's a big difference between those things. All right.
Very busy running the company, and I thought, well, I don't have time to take 5 years out to get a PhD and write this dissertation. So I started contacting schools to explain all the work I'd done with mitochondrial health and the research in algae. And so I found this one school called the Kingdom College of Natural Health, who I sent them all my papers that I'd written, and they said, well, this is sufficient. You don't need to do a dissertation because you've clearly done a lot of research on your own, and everything is science-based, and I am proposing lots of nuances that nobody else is proposing. Like we do know certain attributes about mitochondrial health and what helps them, but nobody knows that these nutrients that help the mitochondria are found in algae. So I've connected the dots in a way nobody else did. So I didn't have to write a dissertation, but I did have to write the exams. So I got my stack of books. There must have been like 6 feet of books. And I had to learn all the different body processes. It was like studying for your medical boards. And by the way, my niece who lives in Calgary is a ER doctor, and she did have to study the boards, and she has to put it into play every single day when she's saving people's lives. I only wanted the PhD so that I could continue doing research and speak and be able to give my knowledge to people who wanted to hear it. So I had to write the exams. So I wrote them all last summer, and I got the good news that I passed. It was like the first week of September. In fact, my graduation ceremony, I wasn't able to go to my graduation ceremony, but I do have my diploma, and they said I can come to the ceremony next year if I want. So it was all, so I had to learn all the different body parts. Some of these exams were very.
All right. So the piece that is concerning to me here is there is a vast difference between taking a bunch of exams and getting a PhD versus doing research, and the point of a dissertation is to learn the research process, learn the statistical analysis process, like defend it against other people, have your ideas tested, have a mentor in the space that helps you understand what is and isn't real, that can connect you with other people, that can challenge your ideas, that can and so to say that the most important part of a PhD is the part that you skipped, that when I heard that, I was like, that was challenging to hear, because that's like the most important part. The rest of it is just stuff that you can study for. Like, and I'm not saying that that's not amazing and that's not so awesome that she did that, and like it's so hard to do. I'm not saying that at all, but that is different than the dissertation portion, which is the longest part of a PhD.
Right. I have a couple points I want to make, but first I want to ask you just like a couple interview questions really quickly. I'm not sure everybody maybe completely understands the process of like a PhD other than doing like the research. So can you explain why the defense of a PhD is so important to the process, and like finding a mentor and getting really zeroed in on the space, learning the research process, like why does all of this matter? What is it going to, contribute to my product, for example?
There's a couple things. One, in the process, I would say, and the other piece that I think is really important in a dissertation is that you're adding to science. Like you're adding new research to science. That's the biggest thing. Like the biggest bottom line thing is an outcome, I feel like. But one of the biggest things is the process, going through the process, learning the statistical methods, learning how to read other research and not just look at the abstracts and things like that, and start to understand what makes a piece of research good, what makes a study design good, what are the ways that you can test a hypothesis that you have, what are ways that you can control for your own bias, what are ways that you can, like, all of these things are so important, like the micro skills. It's like learning a mental framework, having a new mental framework to approach the world with a scientific method, essentially, in a legitimate way. And then having mentorship in someone, it's hard to read the label from inside the bottle, right? And so having that mentor, having that person that helps you in your PhD, they are seeing things, they know things that you just don't know because of time on Earth. Time on Earth is an untrumpable statistic. I have more time on Earth than you, CJ, and that lends to me knowing some things through life experience that you don't maybe know yet. And it's not because you're not good enough or not smart or anything. It's just time on Earth. And that's a huge piece of having that mentorship and advisor and someone that can help you with that kind of stuff. As you're learning those micro skills, you can learn those faster, and then they can test you and push against you. And then defending is huge because you're there. It's not just one person. There's a whole board of people. You have a whole board that you have to go, and you get grilled. I had an ex who got her PhD from like an R1 institution, like the highest level research institution you can get from. And she talked about how insane defending her PhD was. And it was like really freaking hard. They grilled the shit out of her, asked her really hard questions. Well, why didn't you do it this way? Why'd you do it that way? And to just really make sure that what you're putting out there into the world and the research that you're doing and the methods that you're applying and the way that you're thinking about things aren't biased. You're not confirming your own thoughts and your own hypotheses. You're really trying to stick to the science. And if you don't go through that process, if you don't learn that, if you don't have someone like that, if you don't do that, then you fall into these implicit biases that are so easy to fall into. Even I fall into, everybody does. Like, so if you don't have that outside support and help, like, what do you do? And then, like I said at the beginning, the very end is like, you're adding to research, you're adding to science. I think that's the coolest part of a PhD is you've got a dissertation, you've got a thing that's out there that you added to science. You cut a chunk out for yourself, and that's kind of cool.
Yeah. So a couple points I wanted to make. One, I mean, my girlfriend is in the process of just like a master's thesis right now. And I think that something maybe a lot of people don't get is it's like you're not just like getting a PhD in this field, you are getting a PhD in something very, very narrowed down and specific. And to be fair, I think this is a great research question, like making like mitochondria and algae something that you want to study the effects of. That would be a great research track question, but you essentially get drafted by PhD programs based off of how well you are able to pose this question. So that's, I think, a big piece. And then something else that I wanted to bring up in our own research is that Kingdom College of Natural Health is not actually accredited in the United States or worldwide. The way that we're able to check that, there is a whole website, and I will link it in the description below, but you can type in the name of any college worldwide and it will tell you the World Higher Education database. And it will tell you where these are accredited. And so what this college actually is they have like different natural health, essentially certifications that you can do, but this is different than an accredited school program, which, Cody, I'd actually also like for you to maybe break that down for us as someone who is, accredited in like the IFS Institute, but that's not something that's, obviously like formally recognized by universities, for example. So can you talk to us a little bit about what that looks like, higher education certifications versus like natural health certifications or therapy certifications or things like that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the easiest one, the one I had the most direct experiences with is there's like, how do you become a therapist is an easy way to think about it. And the one I had the most direct experience with, so to become a therapist, there's a couple ways, right? You could go to medical school and become a psychiatrist, and you're going through medical school and then specializing in psychiatry and getting an MD, a medical degree. You could also get a DO, there's other different types of medical degrees you could get and specialize in psychiatry, and that could lend you into becoming a therapist, if you will. You could go and get a PhD and become a psychologist and then practice as a therapist. You could get a master's in social work. You could get a master's in counseling and then go become a therapist. And those are all different pathways that you can go to kind of become a therapist that are through a school process, essentially. Then there are things like in those, you're learning the history of therapy, the history of psychology, the history of big figures that were a big piece of it, frameworks that have worked really well. You're learning all of the past. You're learning about ethics. You're learning about case management. Hopefully you're learning about trauma, some of these types of things. Like you're learning about a wide breadth of different things before you dive into like what would be considered therapy. And then you get licensed in your state. Hopefully soon that you'll be able to get licensed across the US or across a wider area. But currently, most often you have to get licensed in a specific state, do boards, all the kind of stuff, and then you become a licensed therapist. The other half of this is places like the Internal Family Systems Institute, IFS Institute, the Somatic Experiencing Institute, Compassionate Inquiry, EMDR even. All of these are frameworks. I know IFS best because that's what I'm trained in. So IFS is a framework that Dr. Richard Schwartz, who has a PhD in psychology, he spent years researching this and creating this and doing research on this methodology, this process of trauma therapy that he founded and created. It's a methodology of trauma therapy that he created, essentially. And yet he pulled from all sorts of different things and put it together into the IFS process that we know and love today. Same thing for somatic experiencing. Same thing for compassionate inquiry, same thing for EMDR. Generally, these things are founded by PhDs, MDs, psychiatrists, psychologists, things like that. Create a process. They're doing the therapeutic in their therapeutic practice or in their therapeutic research, and they create that process. Okay, so then he created the IFS Institute. The IFS Institute, when you get your master's in counseling, you might learn a little bit about IFS, but you're not getting completely trained in IFS. You're somatic experiencing or any of these types of things. Newer programs and things like that might let you specialize in one of them or like go like do a little bit more of that, but it's a little bit more general. And so what they've done in the space is they've created the IFS Institute, the Somatic Experiencing Institute, all of these places for people who went through the base training of let's just become a basic therapist to know the baseline stuff. They can go get specialized training in IFS and EMDR and all these different things. And they call that CEs, continuing education credits or whatever. And to maintain your licensure, you have to get a certain amount of CEs, but it's also amazing. And you, in my opinion, should go do and learn new skills and things like that constantly, especially if you weren't trained or your program that you went through you didn't really have any trauma therapy training. You're trauma informed, but maybe you're not a trauma therapist. There's a big difference. So you can go to the IFS Institute and you can sign up for a level 1, level 2, level 3 training. And those are programs that usually are a year or 2 years. You go through, you get the training, you're observed by, you have a master, or not a master, but like a high level person in the IFS Institute that's trained to train other trainers. Lots of training. And then you do that. You do observation hours. You have to submit all this stuff to become like level 1 certified and level 1, like a level 1 IFS psychotherapist or practitioner or whatever. The IFS Institute, most of these institutes have 2 pathways. One is a practitioner pathway and one is the trauma, like the therapist side. So if you did your master's in counseling or social work or any of the stuff I just talked, you can then go get IFS level 1 certified, and you can do that from having a master's in counseling. You can also do that from, if you have a background in science or psychology, which is the path that I took, there's the practitioner thing. So you are right next to the people that went through the master's in counseling, all that kind of stuff. And you're learning the same things with them. You're learning IFS psychotherapy, but as a practitioner, and that's the direction I come at it. So my degree is in cognitive neuroscience. And instead of coming from traditional therapy, I came from my degree in cognitive neuroscience, became an IFS practitioner, and I learned from that. I don't have a PhD in IFS, right? Because that is an online program, or it wasn't online. Well, it was during COVID, so it was online, but they do them in person. But it was a really, really intense program that you're like learning practical skills, which even that to me is different than what Catherine's talking about here. But that is an example of something like a practitionership or something that you could do, like a certification or something like that you could do online, and a really, really intense one versus like traditional school or like master's, PhD, MD, that kind of stuff. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I think like a quick follow-up I want to ask is I believe when I looked it up, like the kinds of degrees they offer or like, programs that they have are essentially like natural health, organic health, like more holistic health, things like that. So I guess what I would ask is like what is like a big difference to you? Like why would I trust going to you as my therapist, even though, you're not a PhD, but I wouldn't trust, going to somebody maybe in like the product space or the supplement space, um, who has clearly done, like work in natural health. It's just not, to the level of academia accreditation yet.
So you're saying why trust someone who's like building products and doing things versus someone who has a PhD essentially?
Yeah. I mean, because, you're like a therapist, but you're not a therapist in the traditional method.
Right. Fair.
Right.
The way that I think about it, and I think about this all the time, is, and I love PhDs, no shade at them. I'm thought about getting one myself many times, still might, but they're generally two things. Two things I thought about. When you're talking about like this PhD in natural health, it comes off as, oh, I'm going to learn about natural health and do this kind of stuff. And the framing of that PhD, air quotes, in my opinion, is backwards, because a PhD is for you to do research. You know what I mean? Like not just to go learn more about a field. It's to do research and add to that field. And so the framing of what they're calling a PhD is more similar to a non-thesis master's, in my opinion. Like we see this a lot. Like when we research companies and stuff, we see this all the time. You can get a PhD or whatever from some of these weird esoteric places no one's ever heard of. They're not like a research institute, like here in Kansas City, UMKC or KU Med or Mizzou, right? They're just some like a random college that's usually not actually in the literal US, and it's kind of a little weird, and it feels a little fuzzy, and it feels more like a master's than it does really a PhD, which is the focus of a PhD is a research question. And then you go look and you learn about all of the stuff that you're going to research and everything that's important and relevant and all the current research and all that stuff. You learn about all that stuff in the process of getting your PhD, but it's vastly different from what feels more like a master's program. So that's just one thing. That's the first thing I was thinking about when you said that. The second thing is, why might someone go to someone who is like a me instead of a PhD psychologist or who's heavy in the research? The easiest way that I kind of think about it is, if you're doing super heavy esoteric research, you don't always have the blocking and tackling of working with someone in the chair, where you're working with someone and helping them improve their lives and make the changes. You're in a really in-depth research and you're adding to science, and you're a savage and a pioneer and you're amazing, but that doesn't necessarily translate into behavior change and help for people boots on the ground. And so how I view myself, and I'm sure other people would view themselves, is being able to understand some of this hard science stuff and then be able to translate it into actionable programs. Like instead of just saying, yeah, it takes 63 days to change a habit. That's research from Dr. Caroline Leaf. That's out of Harvard. That's out of MIT. That's research that people have said it takes about 63 days to 84 days to change a habit. Okay, cool. If I gave that research paper to UCJ, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it? You have no idea, right? But and this is just a random example, but what I'm able to do is like, oh, okay, that's interesting. What could we have people do over 63 days towards what outcome, towards removing what pains from their life? And how can I make that easier for them to actually act upon that research? And then I take time to, with individual clients, with group clients, with my, like all of my, like my social media following and things like that, to test these things and do my own research, if you will, with real people, and working them through these different types of programs to help them apply a neuroscience principle into their actual life, instead of just, here's research, it takes 63 days, good luck. It's like, no. Okay, here's what we're going to do over the 63 days. that will actually help you get to this specific outcome, you and being informed with this information. So that's the first step. And then the second step is the blocking and tackling and the roadblocks that come up. So a researcher can say it takes 63 days to change your habit, to change your identity. They don't know necessarily in that research what roadblocks come up for people along that 63-day journey. But when I go through these with people, I instinctually know, okay, around day 21, they're going to shift from this, I can do it, I am so optimistic, to super pessimistic. They're going to go through a giant trough. They're going to hit a cave, and they're going to need a lot of support if they want to stay on the pathway of this 63-day journey. And if they fall off in day 21 to like 27-ish, I would say, then they have to restart that 63-day program again. But someone who just has researched, in a perfect lab setting with the exact people we're paying to make sure they go through this program and the participants are right and all the variables are controlled for, this is what should happen. I love that. Hell yeah, let's go science. In the real world, when you start these programs and you get slapped in the face on day 21 and you have no one there to help you, that's the blocking and the tackling and the like boots on the ground type of stuff that I really feel like someone like me or someone similar to me can help with. I think Catherine is a great example of that as well. Like, I think that she has done a lot of that stuff. She's seen the stuff. She's done it with herself. She's done it with her own people. Like, she's done it with, she's taken the ENERGYBits herself. Like, and I just really feel like she solved problems, boots on the ground. And I think that she is correct. Everything I just described is really valuable and really does help people. And I know that. Catherine knows that. You know that. But then you get into the people who are doing the research and stuff, and they're like, oh, well, you don't have the credentials, you don't have that kind of stuff. And there's this weird tension, which drives me crazy because I feel like we should like love each other. We should be super helpful for each other. And I think that comes because there are people that really take advantage of and maliciously use knowledge, and they abuse the system as opposed to being legitimately actually caring about other people and actually running programs based on science and helping people and being transparent about what they're saying and they're doing and their credentials and all this kind of stuff. So that would be my thought on that.
Yeah. A bit of a long answer, but just like in sum, the difference between what this claim is and what you do is essentially like PhD. Whenever you say PhD, there's this very heavy research insinuation that you have done research in this field, you've made progress in this field. Whereas, if you're in maybe this space where you're doing like coaching, or, you have accreditation from like an institute, but maybe not an academic one, like a lot of that might be like more patient facing. And I mean, I also definitely hear the difference in like, it is a little, different when you are doing something like coaching. And if you are through an institute like IFS, you get tested on this, right? Like you can lose your accreditation to do such a thing. So I mean, I think that's important too, but right. It's like this patient facing piece, which is great. You very well may be more connected to like the average consumer. And like, I 100% get why people are defending Catherine in the comments, because they see her, like, she does her own content and stuff. That's cool.
Dude, yeah, no, I love it. Citizen science that she's talking about, I think is cool. We talked to Dr. Dan Perry about this as well. And like, we talk about this with founders all the time. Like, founders and people who are creating these products and services have such unique insights and data that is really hard for traditional research to get to. But some of these companies have hundreds of thousands of clients and millions of data points that like a scientist can't get that many pieces of data. And because the person looking at the data that they have doesn't have a PhD, it's discredited. But that feels like a gap in modern science. Like, it feels like there's got to be something that we can do. Like, there's got to be a better answer for that. There's got to be a way for us to close that gap, because we're just missing out on so much valuable data, I feel like.
Right. I mean, a lot of like what we hear from founders is that they want to be able to maybe like get science boards or be able to privately fund research. It's just really, really difficult. Off the top of my head, like our first episode, Dr. Paul Zak, like they're in an extremely privileged position with Six because they started as a neuroscience research company that is accredited as a research company. And then Six is founded out of that. Versus, I know we had like Neurode on recently, and like they are a team of researchers who completely understand how this works, and they are still having a hard time
right
making this happen. So
yeah,
So like, of course, like no shade to these founders and they all have great ideas, but of course, to like completely pass our lab test, like you have to have that, especially if you're putting something in your body.
Right. Yeah.
Like
Well, I mean,
assurance is an essential piece.
well, the claims, especially like actual research,
Mhm.
like I don't care as much about your credentials necessarily if the claims that you're making are legitimate claims. Like Pat, I care more about that necessarily because just because you have a PhD doesn't mean that in my opinion, doesn't mean I should just listen to every single thing that you say.
Right. There's some crazy people with PhDs.
So that I still think examining the underlying assumptions and the perspectives and things like that about the claims and the products and the services and all that kind of stuff, I think is still really, really important.
Yeah, I think that's a great point because obviously, like, if Catherine was, coming to this place, but we had more research on mitochondria and algae, I mean, of course, the conversation would still be the same about like the PhD and the accreditation and what that means, things like that. But there's just more basis for the product itself.
Yeah.
And we can go like, okay, well, this claim may be false, but we have extensive research suggesting that this is fine.
Right. The when it
And it would have been different
when it really matters the most
if she had contributed to that research.
Well, yeah, and that's when it matters the most because you just mentioned six. Six isn't just it's come from a research institution. It was founded by 6 neuroscientists who took their lab research and brought it into the real world. So in that case, it's like, oh, okay, you are one of the PhDs or the group of PhDs who has taken literal research that you've done, over 20,000 blood draws, and turned it into a consumer-facing app. Freaking beautiful. Love that. The guy from SunAware, the device that we interviewed last week, I think, he did a PhD in mechanical engineering, which I did not even know was a freaking thing, or electrical engineering, one of the two. And
that's awesome.
The research project, his whole research project was this device, was the SunAware device. And so again,
right.
It's in those unique moments where their literal research they are bringing into the world, and they're coming out of just the research and then getting into the boots on the ground stuff that I was talking about earlier as well. And that is when I hear that, I'm like, oh, okay. So when you say I have a PhD, that in this instance, it means that you did your whole research dissertation on making this thing and studying this specific thing, and you're applying it and taking it into the real world yourself. That's different than I have a PhD and I use these 4 products. So you should just use them because I say so. That isn't quite the same to me necessarily.
Yeah. All right. Well, quite a long-winded, but I think we got into a lot of interesting stuff there. I mean, of course, like it's going to take us a while to explain our positions on these things. Let's keep going and see if you say anything else controversial in this episode.
Very, very complex because you had to talk about interactions, for example, between different nutrients and drugs or different nutrients and other nutrients and herbs. It was very, very difficult. It was very difficult. But I've been taking algae ever since I started down this journey 16 or 17 years ago. And so I want to tell people that even though I'm going to be 70 next year, 70 next year, my brain is apparently still working and I still have the energy to travel and give lectures and run a company. Anyway, so I'm kind of a sample size of 1, but nonetheless, I am proof that, and I do nothing else differently. I don't take any medications. I don't take any other supplements. As I mentioned, I have 2 sisters who are very healthy and very fit, and they do sometimes take the algae still, not as much as I do, but this stuff seems to be working for me. So I'm very excited to help other people enjoy the same kind of health benefits I have personally experienced, both physically, mentally, emotionally, and I attribute most of it to algae.
That is another, I mean, I love that it's worked for her, but N of 1 is not research. Like there are so many other confounding variables and so many other things that can affect that. That's why anecdotal data is not something that we trust in science, or it's not that we don't trust it necessarily, but just a singular person with anecdotal data who literally runs a company that benefits if what she's saying is true is not the arbiter of truth that I would prefer to listen to when it comes to a claim like this, is all I'm saying. Not that it's false.
This is something that I've actually been having to also answer a lot in the comments on Dr. Ben Rain's recent episode about Tylenol and autism. And the reason that we do research specifically is to establish causation. So there may be a correlation between her taking algae and, like aging well, being able to still be active, her energy levels still being up. What research does is it narrows down that the algae is the specific cause of that. What is it, like what is it raising in her body? And so that is like a big piece that like I found myself explaining a lot to people. So whenever we get that across, like, yes, her anecdotal evidence or anecdotal evidence from other users may suggest this, but we have to establish that this is a specific cause for it to be scientifically validated.
Right. Yeah. Correlation versus causation is you learn it in like bio 101 in undergrad, but
yeah, it's
the gift that keeps on giving, bro. Like my favorite example is that when ice cream sales increase, shark attacks increase, right? There's a correlation between ice cream sales and shark attacks.
Or crime. Crime was always the one I heard in psych.
I just think the shark
ice cream and crime go up at the same time.
Ice cream and crime go up at the same time. Shark attacks and ice cream sales go up at the same time. So it's like, does that mean that when there's ice cream sales increases the rate of shark attacks? Are they causatively linked? No. It just so happens that ice cream and shark attacks are both more common in the summer, right? So they are correlated with one another, but they are not causative necessarily. But when you see a headline that says, when ice cream sales increase, shark attacks increase, people start to think, oh, well, maybe the sharks have a sweet tooth. So when you eat more ice cream, now it means that sharks are going to attack you more often. And there's just all sorts of things that could stem from that. Was crazy. I pulled it out of my ass, but you get my point.
Yeah.
So correlation versus causation. All right. It's interesting that you don't have the dissertation piece of a PhD is generally the longest, most thorough portion of a PhD. Usually it's like 2 or 3 years of learning and things like that. And research is a huge piece of PhD research. You keep mentioning research. Is there research that you've like done or performed specifically, or like I'm just curious, or I love connecting all the dots.
Yeah.
Was there any research you performed or things like that they examined for that?
No, so I give these lectures that are CEU credit lectures on mitochondria health, because that's ultimately your longevity and your health are determined by your mitochondria. And so remember, I didn't know what a nucleus was. Certainly didn't know what a mitochondria was. And the electron transport chain is not an easy concept. And the Krebs cycle. These are all very things to get your head around. And pharmaceutical companies are spending billions of dollars trying to figure out how to protect the mitochondria and creating all these drugs. But the irony is I was able to connect the dots in a way that nobody else has. Like, for example, the mitochondria are the only cell in your body that have 2 membranes. All your other cells have a lipid membrane. The mitochondria have that, but they also have an inner membrane. And most people have no idea about that, number one, and where that inner membrane came from, number two, which I'll tell you about if you want to know, and what that does to why it's causing such a problem. Because in the mitochondria, which is where all your cellular energy, the ATP, is produced, a byproduct of ATP are free radicals. And so people go, well, I take antioxidants to get rid of free radicals. Well, because of that inner membrane in the mitochondria, which don't have what's called porins, which are channels that allow antioxidants in or out, most antioxidants can't get in there. So you can have a room full of blueberries or vitamin C or vitamin E, and none of it will stop the free radical damage of the mitochondria. But there are a few antioxidants that can get in there. One is called superoxidismutase, and there's 25,000 studies talking about how superoxidismutase prevents Alzheimer's, prevents heart disease, reduces inflammation, protects the mitochondria. 25,000, that's a big number. But nobody seems to know that superoxidismutase, which is not available in any food, or if you take it, I don't even think there's any supplements. There used to be, but they found out they don't get absorbed. Nobody knows that the highest concentration of SOD is in algae, spirulina algae. But superoxidismutase is also an enzyme. And so all these other cheaper algae companies that cut corners to get to market quickly are using high heat to dry their algae so they can sell more and sell it faster. So their superoxidismutase is deactivated. I didn't know why ours was working so well, because our stuff always works so well. So these are some of the things that I was able this took me 15 years of, this is just one little teeny tiny example of where I was connecting the dots, trying to understand, why mitochondria get damaged, why aren't they, and why is it at age 40 or 50 that they see the most damage, and I can explain to you why.
Some of this stuff, like, no shade at her, but oxidative phosphorylation is the process that she's talking about. And oxidative phosphorylation, oxidative free radicals, oxidative, like I learned that in biology 101 in undergrad. And again, it's no shade. The same thing with the mitochondria. The mitochondria was a single cell organism. It got eaten by another one, and that's why it has a double membrane, and that's why it has its own unique DNA as well, which is interesting. Mitochondrial DNA is different than the DNA of your other organelles, and so some of the stuff that she's saying I researched is looking things up and learning things is different than research. It's different than saying, I think my thing does this. My hypothesis is this. I'm going to run an experiment that supports or doesn't support that hypothesis. And that's what I was asking for here. And I think that's where we kind of got a little bit off, because when I say research, like Dr. Ben, he talked about in his dissertation, the research that he did with mice in his book. He's talking about the research that he did with mice. He talks about how having a mouse that has social connection with another mouse, even just 15 minutes of social connection, an older mouse ages 33% slower. And that is from research that they did, where they had some old mice that were completely isolated and by themselves, and some old mice that had a younger mouse come interact with them for 15 minutes per day. And then they tested those things, and they had a hypothesis, and they tested that hypothesis. And now I can tell you that having social connection can decrease in mice. This specific thing I'm talking about is in mice, can reduce and slow the pace of aging in mice, which then we can create new experiments to test in humans as well. And so that's research, or that's what I was trying to articulate in research. And that's what you do in a dissertation.
Yes.
Which is different than collecting information and learning, which is amazing. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm not saying that's bad at all.
And to be clear, like, that is a kind of research paper you can do, where you create, you have in your mind like a hypothesis that there is a new link between all of these things, and you can take existing data and build a paper off of that and publish it, and that can work as a thesis. I know, because that, again, is like what my girlfriend is working on right now for her master's thesis. Master's is obviously different than PhD, where you do need to take a more active role and do like some of that more intense science. I think the big difference here is getting it into a paper and getting it published, whether that be as a thesis or through like an accredited science magazine, which is like not easy to do, but to me, like, that is a difference. And the way that you can check this, just for listeners, by the way, it's not nearly as easy as checking school accreditation, but schools do keep track of published theses. So you can look in a department and search for students' theses on this and what that actually looks like. So yeah, this wasn't like necessarily like a wrong thing to do. It's just the difference in whenever that's happened, that is peer reviewed, which is something that we really want to narrow down. Is this peer reviewed? Has this been approved by people in the field?
Right. Yeah, no, it's peer review is huge. I mean, I think it's super important. I mean, honestly, I get it. I understand like how this stuff happens. Like I even got heat on this early on in my career as well, because I graduated with a BA in neuroscience. Or a bachelor in neuroscience. My brother got a bachelor's in mechanical engineering. He calls himself an engineer because he got a degree in mechanical engineering. And so I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I got a degree in neuroscience. I'm a neuroscientist. Like not really understanding the difference, or not at that time. I mean, that was however many years ago when I was younger and stuff. But I've updated myself, and I've shifted to saying I have a degree in cognitive neuroscience as opposed to I'm a neuroscientist as often as I possibly can. Do people get me confused or say certain things, or after we talk for a while, they call me one? Okay, whatever. Like, it's just being open to that feedback and understanding that stuff. And it's a shift that I've made, and it's been okay. And I think that would be great. It isn't taken away from what we're doing or what my content or any of that stuff either. So I think that's something that's important too.
Yeah, it's just an added level of transparency, which is what we're trying to get to.
All right, let's see.
Why is it that algae seems to be preventing that? We've done a few clinical trials of our own when I oversaw the clinical trials and all that sort of stuff. So that's because
I didn't see those clinical trials.
Can you verify that?
I didn't.
Okay.
I hadn't gotten them. I hadn't seen them at the time. I don't know if I mentioned anything here, but I hadn't seen any clinical trials yet. And a clinical trial is different than, it doesn't necessarily have to be on clinicaltrials.gov, but most of the time when you say a clinical trial, you'd want it to be, or you'd suspect it would be. Like Qualia Life has a ton of, I was really impressed when we talked with Qualia, because they have, and it makes sense because Dr. Dan is their chief health officer and helping with a lot of this stuff, but they have literal, if you go to clinicaltrials.gov, they do have literal health government clinical trials that they've done, which is cool. And they have a whole process that you can follow where they do some preliminary stuff, then they do some like a preliminary like pilot test, then they do some actual some different testing, and then they go for a full clinical trial thing. It's really cool. But I did not see these for ENERGYBits.
I think we're going to do a future episode on like that full breakdown. So
we are.
Stay tuned for that. We're going to do a future episode on like the full breakdown of research.
I've spent so much time researching all of this, and it all surrounded the mitochondria, trying to figure out what was happening to them, why were they getting damaged, what prevents the damage, what is the process by which ATP is produced, what are some of the there's helper molecules that are also found in algae that stimulate the process of the ATP production. I could go through the whole presentation if you want, but it's very complex. It's very science oriented. So it was, in fact, its own thesis in its own right, if you want to call it that, because it was an approach towards mitochondrial health using the nutrients found in algae, and nobody else has talked about that.
It was a thesis, but only a part of the thesis is the piece that the collecting background research and things like that, and forming a hypothesis. Like, she has ideas and thoughts and stuff. The point of a dissertation then is to take those thoughts and test them.
Yes. Like I have a master's thesis. I did my master's, and like this seems similar to what I did. Like, I had to create a general thesis, and then I did like preliminary research on it that, was not huge. It was just a lot of like survey collecting.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily go anywhere. That's not published. That's
yeah. I mean, I even did undergraduate research that I did that. So right. I feel you.
The part that I'm most interested in is a lot of what you're describing. When you're saying research, where I guess I'm getting confused is it sounds like the literature review portion of a dissertation where you're collecting information, you're collecting stuff. You're starting to think, oh, there's a gap here. No one's talking about this. No one's doing that, which is great. Research, I guess when I hear it, is I had a hypothesis. I tested it with a large sample size. It was double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized. Like, I had research methodology and those types of things. Well, I mean, in a traditional PhD, they'll pay for it or whatever for you to do that. So that's why I was curious. I'm just so surprised they would pull that part out of that specific process of research out of a PhD program.
Yeah.
Because it's like the most important piece.
Yeah. Well, it's unfortunate that we're part of this society that only trusts what I call credentialism. And so it's like you can't be smart unless you have a PhD. Well, I had the same smart before my PhD and after my PhD. And 200 years ago, there weren't universities where people got degrees to get recognition. They just had an idea, and they pursued the idea and tested the idea and got solutions for a problem.
All right. The tiny problem with what she's saying is she's saying they tested those hypotheses. They tested the things they were researching, but she didn't. That was the part I was having the hardest time with, is where was the testing? I didn't see the clinical stuff. She didn't talk about research that she literally did, testing that she literally did. It was mostly literature review. And that's why I was kind of doubling down on some of this, because my red flag meter was kind of going off a little bit on some of this stuff. And again, she's awesome. I love her. Her energy is amazing. Like, give me some of them energy bits or whatever, because she's awesome. I think she's a great person. But that was where my red flags were coming, because what she's saying doesn't match with what she did.
Yeah. I can definitely, sympathize with the fact that like, academia is not the most accessible thing. It's, hard. It's a big time commitment. It's a big financial commitment. All of these things. I think that's something that's super important to notice, which we will of course get into in like our episode upcoming. That's just like the breakdown of the full research process. Is it's not necessarily a good thing that people were just able to go test ideas back in the day. I mean, the most famous is, we have like the Stanford prison experiment or the Tuskegee experiment. These are things you learn very on in the research process, because where we are now, there is an incredibly well-developed system of ethics and reviews and things that are just very, very necessary for the research process that is protected, kind of, especially if you run it through this academic world. Of course, you can like privately fund it through a research company as well. But that, to me, that's like my red flag, is like, you could just go test stuff. And like, I agree, just because you don't have a PhD doesn't mean you're lesser than someone with one. But as far as research goes, that is super important.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think it is as well.
Which is exactly what I did, which is exactly what I was trying to do. And this particular school, it's called the Kingdom College of Natural Health, they recognized that our society has failed us, because what they're doing is allowing people to go to school and just study stuff and get a degree and maybe not solve any problems, but they get a degree, big whoopee, and everyone goes after that. This school says there's people out in the world making change, committing themselves to science,
What she just said is the problem, is what the college she's referencing is doing. Like, did you get that?
School and just study stuff and get a degree and maybe not solve any problems, but they get
to study stuff and then maybe not solve any problems. But that's what research does. Like, research, when you're testing a hypothesis necessarily. And I guess I could understand from her perspective, like, going and starting a company is running an experiment. That is kind of like testing a hypothesis. It's not really the same as science, though. will people buy this thing? Can you market it well enough? Like, is different than the underlying science of something necessarily. So maybe that's where she's coming from a little bit more, but that was interesting.
Get a degree, big whoopee, and everyone goes after that. This school says there's people out in the world making change, committing themselves to science, committing themselves to finding a solution that is natural. And so the reason I went with them is because they said, we are exactly what you need. We will allow people like you who have shown commitment, 15 years of research, pursuing research, learning, creating hypotheses, connecting the dots like no one else has. That's commitment. I mean, on summers, people on the beach, I'm on my computer at 2:00 in the afternoon reading PubMed, trying to understand why one particular thing that I found in one particular passage in a 30-page paper didn't make sense to me, and then I would find something else that would make sense for me. So they recognize there's people like me that need to have the credentialism because of our society, and you have to interview with them, and you have to still write these exams, which are very, very difficult, and pass. In fact, 2 of the exams I didn't pass, but you get a chance to do it twice, so I did do them a second time, and then I had to write another paper to support the one that was the vitamins and interaction with drugs that I didn't do well on. So I feel that I have accomplished the goal which I was trying to achieve by getting a PhD, which was I have done my own literature review. I have come up with theses and solutions that nobody else seems to have been noticing. It's like you can't see the forest for the trees. Everyone's in silos in the science world. And so I stepped back and looked at the bigger problem and realized, gosh, SOD, there's people that are focusing on SOD, but they don't know there's SOD in algae. There's people focusing on the electron transport chains. They don't realize that CoQ10 molecule and the cytochrome C molecule are improved by nutrients found in algae. There's other people looking at apoptosis and autophagy, and they don't realize that you don't have to, glutathione isn't the only thing that will improve autophagy. You can get autophagy through the nutrients found in algae. So I took a very high level approach to what a lot of siloed scientists were doing, and I put it under the umbrella called algae nutrition that has all these incremental individual nutrients that collectively work together to solve a problem that they're trying to create drugs to solve. And you don't need the drugs if you have good, healthy algae. And by the way, algae is the first.
Dude, to me, that's an entrepreneur.
Mhm.
I love that. I am that person. I do what she's talking about for trauma, for like attachment trauma, for mental health. I do what she is talking about. I take all these different siloed things, neuroscience and psychology and philosophy and all of these different flavors of things for personal development and put it under the umbrella of my own umbrella. But I call myself an entrepreneur and an innovator, so it's interesting. I understand what she's talking about in relation to wanting the PhD and the credentials to like get into the conferences and stuff, but also screw it. I mean, I don't know. I guess my perspective is what's the benefit? Like I've never necessarily thought like, oh, I need to get into a conference. Like, no, I'm going to go help millions and millions of people learn along the way. And that's, if somebody with a PhD wants to tell me that I'm not good enough because I don't have a PhD, but I've helped millions of people, I'm going to take the helping millions of people every day.
Right. And again, I mean, I think I'd like to reiterate, like a lot of the founders that you interview here on the show are in like the same boat of, they have this interest, but they don't have like the science to back it up. I don't know that they're necessarily like blocked by that though. I think they just really, instead of trying to fit in the science world, really heavily lean into being an entrepreneur and are gaining recognition in that way.
Right. I mean, Stephen Kotler has written many, 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 many books. He knows more about neuroscience than probably most neuroscientists, and he is not technically a neuroscientist. He's an author. Dr. Jeff Hawkins, or I don't even think he has a literal PhD. I'm pretty sure he has a mechanical engineering degree or electrical engineering degree. But he's written so many books about neuroscience that other neuroscientists call him a neuroscientist. But they didn't come and say that. Other people were saying those things about them. They're not saying it necessarily about themselves. So it's interesting. It's an interesting, weird space. No shade at Catherine. I hope people don't think that I don't like her or anything like that. I think she's awesome. We had a great conversation before and after the podcast. She sent us some of the ENERGYBits and stuff. No shade at her or what she's trying to do. I'm here for it. I support entrepreneurship. I am an entrepreneur.
The next segment I wanted to jump into is actually at the end, at the lab results section. My instinct is that people aren't making it this far into the conversation to kind of see what you and Chloe actually say at the end about this conversation and about this grilling.
I didn't even necessarily think it was a grilling. I'm so surprised people call it a grilling. I was just asking questions that serve the mission of the entire purpose of the company, which I will continue to do no matter what people say. I'm unbothered, but it's just surprising to hear that.
We're here more than anything to reiterate our mission and to educate about why this is important. But yeah, I think you and Chloe said some really positive things in the end, so I just wanted to to verify.
Let's talk.
All right, welcome to the lab results section. We're coming down. We're coming down. This is where we get to break down what we really think and talk about the lab results test. So, what are your just base level? I took a lot of the questions on that, so I apologize.
Yeah, I know. I was like, you are in your flow. I'm just gonna like, oh my God, and listen. So this was a very Cody Run podcast, but
Yeah, my bad.
it was a journey. Like there was so many things that I learned from that about Algae that I did not know. It kind of changed the way I thought about it. She's very, very, knowledgeable, has scanned a lot of the research. And then there's some things where there's a lot of pieces in which we had to kind of question the research and question the validity of it.
Yeah.
And so
yeah,
it was a wild ride for a podcast, for sure.
That was the biggest thing for me. I get a lot of that flat myself. I could not understand where she's talking about as far as credentialism. I could not understand that better. Like I 100% get where she's coming from.
I think you're pretty consistent.
There's a reason the traditional PhD process, it looks like the traditional PhD process. And so something that takes you less than or a little bit over a year versus 5 to 7 years on average. And there's a really big difference in gathering research and doing research.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of gathered research, which I 100% love. I totally respect, and I love that. And I have a corollary to my own self in the therapy space with IFS. So I 100% get that. But I haven't run IFS research. I haven't tested a hypothesis yet. I collect data on my clients and things like that, but I haven't run that. I haven't defended a dissertation. So there's parts of that I think are really important, and adding to that scientific literature as opposed to just looking through it and examining it. There's a difference. And so that was something that I was kind of skeptical of and interested in, but she was very transparent and very open about it. She didn't hide anything. She didn't try to so I respect that. I love that. And I'm so happy that it's helping her spread her message. I just worry about what the consumer might assume when they say PhD versus what it actually is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. But I think she did really well at answering the questions and being very open, transparent, and honest. And you could feel that from her.
Oh yeah, 100%. I could feel the authenticity, her story of bankruptcy and all that kind of stuff, fucking crazy. It has a lot.
It was really powerful. I was not double clicking on that more because her story of resilience. How many years did she say she was doing this for? 8 years. She'd gone bankrupt. That's so impressive.
Wow.
And so
I think we got it. I think so. You guys were really, really consistent in what you said.
Yeah, I mean, she's awesome. I have no shade against her at all. So I mean, but
yeah,
the point of the podcast is to ask those questions.
I do think it's interesting that you brought up at the end, worrying about what a consumer might think about a PhD. Just answering comments on this video and especially on Dr. Ben Rains. I want your perspective on this because we both work in social media, obviously. Do you think that matters to people anymore? I think we're kind of in an interesting space with that. And that, of course, was part of the reason that led to this podcast.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I think it does matter. I don't know if people traditionally care as much necessarily because they're just not. We've moved into such a weird space where content, you can get hooked into a piece of content and there's just so many things. I mean, it's so weird because I've helped so many freaking people with certain things. Or even when I'm watching content, I see someone that's helped a bunch of people with getting certain outcomes. I'm like, oh, okay, well, do they have a PhD? No, maybe not, but they've helped multiple people get to the outcome, bottom line. And so sometimes I feel like people miss the outcome for the credentials or whatever. It's I think about this all the time. This example all the time. Who are you going to follow into war? The guy that just got in from West Point that's in a perfectly pressed suit, doesn't have a single scratch on him, no battle scars at all, or the dude who's missing some fingers, who's bloody and bruised from the battle he just walked in the door from and has been on the front lines for 10 years. Who would you feel more confident following into your next battle necessarily? And I know that's an extreme example overall, and absolutely, I think both should. The commanding officer dude in the nice suit should talk to that guy that's been on the front lines, and they should kind of figure it out and work together and do the whole thing. And that's awesome. But I do think that social media does lend to, because that analogy is great because social media lends to the guy who's battle worn. That's more visually oh shit, he's been through some stuff. And he whereas the other guy is what are we doing here? He has the credentials, but this guy is, our brains know that his brain has been through the reps of things more times necessarily, or that's what our brains are led to believe by the visual necessarily. That does not mean the guy who's all dressed up nice hasn't been through some shit. He's just dressed up nice right now. And so it's an interesting thing because one half is what our brains get tricked into and one half is what actually matters.
Right. I always, of course, err on the side of credentials, but this is something that Dr. Ben brought up as well in his episode, and he was a great reference just because he has a social media following. But he brought this up in relation to like the Tylenol autism debate. And he's like, look, I studied this. This is what I did my dissertation on. Here is my research. I think he broke it down very, very clearly. But he also mentioned it doesn't necessarily matter because a lot of people aren't going to trust me on this because you're just not as familiar with me.
Right.
And he's pretty big. But he was like, if I say something versus, you know, if the office of the president says something, you're probably going to believe them because you're more familiar with them.
Right. That's the thing, is how our brains work, and social media is set up in a way that like acts upon that. And so it just makes it so freaking hard, like whether you have a credential or not, people are just going to question it and stuff, which just makes it hard in general. Because even our mission here is, if everyone is questioning, if everyone is just saying random things and we don't have a system that we can follow, it's hard to know what's legit and what's not anymore, which is scary.
Right. So I do wonder that working on this sometimes, because we of course are always erring on the side of credentials. We're backing everybody up and we're getting some flack for that, but we're not going to change.
I mean, I would argue that we err on the side of transparency, in my opinion.
Yes.
To me, it's not, do you have the credentials? It's like, are you like, okay, are you the veteran that's been out in the front lines and you're bloody and bruised and all that kind of stuff, and you're sharing your stories and your experience and how you've helped people through that battle zone? Or are you the researcher? Either one is a form of credential, in my opinion. It's, are you transparent about which one you are?
Yeah.
And that is what is most important to me when I am thinking, did they pass the lab results or not? Is this person someone we can listen to or not? Like that's the thing that matters the most, in my opinion, to me.
Yeah. And I think that makes sense.
Hell yeah. Cool.
So perfect. So we'll just do like a quick wrap up now. I think we got through all of our points. We just wanted to, you know, end on the note of like, moments like this are what we are about. We're not trying to prove someone right or wrong. We just want to have space for like honest dialogue. And of course, it was great that she responded in the way that she did. We've had some previous episodes where we question people and it doesn't always go this well. So this was actually like a great example for that reason. She handled it with openness and curiosity, and that's a win. It shows great accountability, and it shows that we can have a conversation about these things and put them out and be honest on social media. And I think that's huge to starting to combat this narrative a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't agree more. I hope to have more conversations like it. I think it's a fun time.
All right. Perfect. Well, we have some more episodes lined up. Of course, we're going to be doing the main show. We'll have some episodes on research coming up, more expert interviews, all kinds of good stuff on the way. If there's any other episodes you want us to react to, let us know in the comments, you know, on Instagram. They're going straight to me. I will respond to you, and I await your reactions.
Hey, let's go.
Thanks for tuning in for this special episode of TDL. A little bit different, something new that we tried this time. Let us know what you think.
Hell yeah. And remember, always question everything, especially your own beliefs, people. See you next time. Peace.